Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and I'm excited to bring a special guest on here today, RJ Gray. He's the CEO of the Oklahoma Cooperative Council. RJ, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Mark.
I'm excited to get in here, dive into this. You do a lot of work with a lot of the same kind of companies that we do. You got a lot of oversight in that arena. I also think you got a really cool perspective on life that I think people are going to enjoy learning from. So let's get to the opening question though, which is, what does it mean for you to be intentional?
Man, that is a great question. I think for me personally, I think being intentional really is foundational. I think, and I'll be honest with you, the intentionality is not something that I think is innate, and that you kind of have to learn to do. For me, especially, and I think for me, being intentional is living in my truth, right? So I think it's being honest with myself. I think it's doing, I obviously intentional is doing what you say you're going to do, as an example. But I think, if it's like I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. and work out, I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. and work out. There isn't a hit at the snooze. There isn't, any wiggle room there. It's being honest and truthful with myself. I think the other thing that I really, when I work with our members, is this idea that, you have to pause and reflect. I think so often we get caught up in the day-to-day minutia of things, right? So, I think Covey calls it the whirlwind or whatever, but, and we don't spend a whole lot of time on the things that are important, strategic goals, strategic family goals, whatever it might be. And I think we have to pause weekly and daily and reflect on, okay, what's tomorrow look like? What's this week look like? What's the next 3 months look like? And then try to be intentional, but also to be disciplined enough, because there's been times in my life where I haven't been, and that is being very intentional about, like, if my calendar says I've got a meeting with myself at 3, I've got a meeting with myself at 3. That doesn't mean I make a phone call because I need to get caught up, right? And so, but I think, the first step for me to be intentional was understanding kind of what my purpose, passion, values, strengths, those type of things were. But to me, and for me, being intentional is all about action and reflection. So,
Mhm. I like it. I like it a lot, especially this part about pausing and reflecting, which I think you highlighted a really common thing that people do. They may block some white space into their calendar, but then when it gets time, and I do this too, man, like it gets time to go, like, be in that white space. Maybe it's, whatever, you set an appointment with yourself to go do something, to
yeah,
reflect, to pause, to catch up on some work, whatever. And then, I mean, I find myself going through all the open tabs on my web browser, or
yeah,
or sifting through emails or making those calls. And
yeah,
maybe you block from 3 to 5 on your calendar, and all of a sudden it's 4:30 and you still haven't got any actual thinking done.
that's
And
right.
intention requires thinking. There's no way around it, you guys. Like, an intention requires that you just think. You have, as a leader, you have to take time to think. And so many of us are just like in reactive mode
Yeah.
all day long, from wake up until going to sleep, and you never get a chance to recover.
You're absolutely right. I think being honest with ourselves and keeping that time. I think, and it doesn't have to be, for 30, even positive reflecting for 30 minutes a week, or 10 minutes a day, just to recap what happened in the day. Look
Mhm.
at your notes, because that's one thing I was terrible about too, is I take pages and pages of notes but don't look at them. That's real smart, you know what I mean? And so I think it's being intentional about that. But and I also think you can't give what you don't have, right? So as a leader, how do we give back to our teams? How do we give back to the people we serve if we don't take time and be intentional with our white space, and fill our buckets, so to speak, right?
Yep, absolutely. We'll push you on something here. What
Okay.
does it mean to live in your truth?
So for me, and that's a great question. But for me, and I know that sounds so cliche, but for me, it's this idea of what are my values? What's important to me? And what's my passion? What's my purpose? What's my strength? For me, I feel like my purpose and passion really is to empower, whether it be through the policy work we do, whether through the training and development that we do. But I think for a long time, I grew up in a very agrarian family, like most people on this podcast that are listening to have, and the people that spoke on it have. And work was always the first word I think I heard growing up was we're going to work. That's the life, life's not going to be fun. You're going to work, you're going to work, you're going to work. And so I struggle with the family aspect of it. I've been married 20 years. I have three beautiful kids, and putting them first, I think was difficult until I sat down, looked at what my values were, and my values really were family and faith. And I had to spend time with family and faith. And so I think for me,
Mm.
living in that truth is being available, even though I have an tense travel schedule, being available to take the kids to the doctor or soccer practice, or be willing to move my schedule around or protect that time with them when I am home, that I'm not on the phone with a board member, or I'm not on the phone with a general manager or something. It's really that concept of I'm going to say what I'm going to do what I say, and I'm going to say what I do. You know what I mean? It's just being truthful with myself and honoring myself. Because if I can't be, it's one thing to have integrity with the people that you work with, but behind the scenes, if you don't have integrity with yourself, I mean, really, do you have integrity? And I think that's the important thing.
Yeah. A lot of gold in there, guys. Might want to rewind a second, just listen to that over again. There's a lot of a lot of gold in there. But you bring up a really interesting point, and it's around what I know you get into this with a lot of your members and clients, and this is one of the big three requests that we get from ours. And you brought it up in terms of making sure that you have time to take a kid to an appointment or go to the soccer game or whatever the case may be, depending on the age that they're at. I've got a 14-year-old national team playing volleyball player right now, and we're on a plane at Thursday night to Salt Lake City. She's 14 years old. We're flying from North Carolina to Salt Lake City to go for a 3-day volleyball tournament. She just was in Atlanta last weekend. And then, 2 weeks after that, she goes to Philadelphia. I mean, this is like college level stuff. And we're 14. We haven't even got to high school yet.
We're not quite there.
Anyway, and it requires a lot of time and intention to go into to curate. Not let alone, let's not talk about the money, but it takes a lot of time and intention to make sure that you're available. I can't go to every single one, but I do make sure that, hey, you know what, this weekend we're going to Salt Lake City, and this is our one-on-one trip. So I do a one-on-one trip with each of my kids every year.
That's cool. Yeah.
So I'm going to go hike Appalachian Trail for a few days with my 8-year-old son in August.
Awesome.
And there's a method behind that madness, because that doesn't mean like the work goes away.
Yeah.
Right. So just because you're making your kids a priority and being a good dad doesn't mean that there's still not a whole pile of. I've got a whole. This morning I sat down on one of these big yellow legal pads. I sketched out. I filled up the whole page. I went into another page of stuff that's either in progress, not done, or is about to come on, to the hot plate, right, and get on the stove. Anyway, my point in all that context is to say, what's your point? What's your advice with people for managing that work-life balance and keeping the priorities? Because at the end of the day, none of us is going to resent ourselves for not selling another 100 tons of fertilizer. We will resent ourselves for those moments that we missed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's tough because I think, we're taught from a very young age, especially in agrarian families, that work is not optional and it's a part of who we are. And so I mean, just to be honest, it is tough. It's a constant struggle with me as well. I have a 7 and a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and then a daughter in heaven. And I both boys, I missed their first words. Boys, I missed their first steps. I've missed birthday parties. I missed, and so for me, I think it was coming to the realization that I get X amount of time with these beautiful things, these gifts that God gave me, and I need to take that time, and work is always going to be there, right? I think we have to learn how to delegate as well. I think we have to learn how to say no. I think so often as leaders, I think what's that old adage? I'll do it myself. If I want it done right, I'll do it myself. I think we have to be trustworthy. The people around us, we have to lean into those people. But I think ultimately you just have, I think, more than anything, I think we do as people, we just have to make decisions that this is the way we're going to live our life. And then understand that work is still going to be there tonight after they go to bed. It's still going to be there on Saturday when they're, watching cartoons. I mean, yeah, and we can make other time to do those things, but to take time really to your point, and I hadn't thought about it up until a few years ago. I really like that you do experiences with your kids. That's something that my wife and I have tried to transition to. You're not going to remember that they had the Nintendo Switch or whatever, but they're going to remember that for you, for example, you're going to hike with your son on
Mhm.
on Appalachia Trail or take your daughter to Salt Lake. They're going to remember that. Our kids remember, the fun things that we do with them, the fishing trip, whatever it might be. So
Yep. I tell you what, man. I mean, and by the way, these are all lessons learned the hard way.
yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you.
That
Yeah,
now we're thank goodness we recognize it in time. We're being intentional enough. That's part of
yeah,
what being an intentional leader is about, right? It, for me, is really seeing what that the real juice of life, right? Like the real
right.
stuff, like the stuff that I know that I'm going to remember, and like and then being able to see and then take massive action to make a plan and actually go about curating those things in life. Learned all that the hard way because whatever, I got the phones way too early for my girls,
Yeah,
and there was excuses and reasons for that we don't need to get into, but I did. And like once you cross that barrier, like you don't go back.
yeah.
Like you can implement rules. I have screen time limitations, etc. But when we moved to North Carolina 2 years ago, made a very conscious decision to not have a TV in the house.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So we just cut it out. And if we want to do a movie night, we set up a projector. I'm a
Yeah.
trainer. I own a projector, right? So
Yeah.
we'll set up the projector, hook it up to the laptop. We'll stream a movie onto the white wall in the living room, and
Yeah.
everybody can watch that. And we hook it up to the big speaker, and it's like a surround sound in the living room. But then
Yeah.
we shut it down. So now in the morning, I'm not fighting Netflix, right? I'm not
Yeah.
fighting somebody or kids fighting over, hey, who gets to watch what show tonight? It almost never happens. So what happens in place of that is we have long, slow suppers,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right? I mean, supper might be from the time a pan hits the stove around 5:30 at night until it's shut down. It might be 8:30.
Hmm.
Everybody's rushing out because they got to go watch their show. And
Yeah.
so that was just one of those things where it's atypical. Most people are not willing to do that. God forbid you should miss your Fox News or your freaking
Yeah.
sports update on ESPN or whatever. But what you're saying, subconsciously, and some people are not going to like this. What we're saying subconsciously when we make ESPN a priority over family time
That's right.
is that subconsciously that's more important to you
That's right.
than sitting down and teaching, maybe reading a little bit of scripture after a meal,
That's
you
right.
know, or,
Yeah.
or just talking about what's going on, and just holding that space. And granted, that's not every night. Like we're no perfect family over here, but we face the same battles as everybody else. But it boils down as much as we can. We're trying to curate some of those really intentional experiences,
Oh, no,
for
you're
the.
right. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Absolutely right. No, I think for us, we have TVs, but we're still at that age where they don't really come on. I think the only time that they really come on anymore is like my wife and I are both avid college football fans, and
Yeah.
I happen to be an Oklahoma State Cowboy. She's a Gooner. And I'm sure some of your folks will like that. But honestly, nighttime at dinner, like they don't have phones yet, but they have tablets. And
Mhm.
they want to watch their tablets at dinner. I'm like, no, we're going to talk about, so I want to know, so what'd you learn today?
Mhm.
Tell me something about, I always ask them, tell me, something about one of your friends, like what'd you do with one of your friends today? And then I recently started asking them, I learned this from John Maxwell actually, is what'd you fail at today? You know what I mean? So we try to have pretty
Mhm.
pointed conversations around those things. And so, because I mean, and I'm not home every night, like last week I was home one night. I was home
Yep.
Wednesday night, I was home Tuesday night, and I was home Friday night, that was it. And so I try to be intentional about whenever we sit down to eat. And I know my wife, when I'm not home, when she makes dinner, when I'm gone, she does the same thing with the boys. There's no tablets at dinner. And honestly, it's just to
Yep.
really try to connect with them.
Yeah.
Because you move at a fast pace, right? I don't care what age you are, you still move at a fast pace. So
Absolutely. So true. I mean, it just takes setting that part of the day, like setting
yeah,
the intention of that part of the day around connection. And it just becomes a rule. It's a hard and fast rule. There's no devices at the dinner table,
yep,
period. End of story. You can go get them when we're done.
yeah,
And keeping that space sacred is really handy. I got to share a quick little story. So, um, it's easy for those boundaries to become very gray quickly,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
when we set that rule, we generally think, okay, at supper time or dinner time, depending what part of the country you're in, right? It's that
That's
evening
right.
meal, right? And so we've set that. We have no problem with that. We have no pushback on that. Nobody's, even coming close to breaking the rule most of the time. So one day at lunch, I sit down and it's just like kind of the middle of the day. The kids were home for some reason. It's the middle of the workday. And often when I'm doing that, like I'll take in a little bit of content, maybe an educational video on YouTube or
Yeah.
something like that. It's a little bit of a learning time for me. So I sat down to the meal. My daughter sits down with me middle of the day. Let's call it a Thursday afternoon or Thursday about 12:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And I get out my phone. She had sat down at the table without her phone obediently.
Yeah.
And as soon as she saw me get my phone out, okay, she gets up, leaves her meal, walks to her bedroom, gets her phone, brings it back out, and sits down with me.
Yeah.
And my wife called me out on it in the kindest way possible because we have a coach. Okay. And one of the things that our coach says is that what your kids, and by the way, guys, what your employees see you do,
Yeah. That's
and
right.
what your kids see you do in exception, what your employees see you do in exception,
Yeah.
they will do in excess.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's
I
good.
was like,
Yeah.
oh, and so my wife whispers this behind me. She's like, I heard the other day somebody said what you do in exception, your kids will do in excess. And I'm like, crud. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
Maggie, put your phone down. We're gonna sit here. Let's just have lunch. And but we have to, like, that's what intention means, right? Like in the moment, that to me is what intention, being an intentional leader, that's what it looks like. You're not going to get it perfect. Intentional leadership is not about perfection. It's about being intentional. It's about the journey, the progress that you're making along the way, right?
Absolutely.
And just trying to get better. So cool, man. We could talk parenting stuff and all those good things all day
Yeah.
long, but
Yeah. I hear you.
just share a little bit about what you guys do, what you do at the Oklahoma Co-op Council, and
Yeah.
how you serve your members.
Yeah, so we do first and foremost, we represent them through the policy and advocacy space. So we at our state capitol and then obviously with our delegation in Washington, we work with them, and then we work with other groups in our state and other groups nationally. We do obviously, I think most of the people on the call or on your podcast listen to, hopefully are familiar with cooperatives at some extent, but cooperatives are owned by farmers, and so they're also governed, and so we work with them on how to govern and what the fiduciary responsibilities are. We have various programs for them, whether it be fundamental programming or whether it be topical for industry related stuff. And then we do a lot of employee development, and we don't do, there are other organizations that do a lot of technical development, which for me would be like how to do their jobs, how fertilizer, inventory, those type of things. We really focus on more of the professional leadership, team aspect with employees. And then we just try to serve our members any way that they need to be served, or find somebody that can serve them. And so we do a lot of business consulting with them. We're in a lot of boardrooms throughout the year, whether it be in Oklahoma, Texas, or Kansas. So
Cool.
yeah.
Man, so you're on the road all over the place serving these customers across not just Oklahoma though, right? Because it
Right.
sounds like you're going up into Kansas and
Yeah.
different areas as well.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of work. So we do a lot of work in Oklahoma and Kansas, and quite a bit in the Texas Panhandle. Over the last couple of years, our growth has really been in the state of Kansas. We continue to do a lot of work in Oklahoma, but we have
Mhm.
members in Kansas that see a need to be a member of the Oklahoma organization, and so we go up and serve them as well. So yeah, I spent a lot of time on the road, and it's like weird because it's, you think it'd be South Central Kansas, but it's really not. It's all the way to, almost Nebraska on both sides of the state, to the middle. I mean, it's just really kind of all
Mhm.
over.
Wow, good for you. When you're out there doing employee development, leadership development, those kind of things with the members, what are some of those big requests or challenges that are coming up that they're facing?
Yeah, so just last week I was in northwest Kansas, or north central northwest Kansas, working with a co-op, and the manager had been there for, I don't know, a few years, the team that he had, had been there as well, but they are all new in their roles. And so they really didn't have this concept of working together, and they're really trying to, they've done strategic planning with their board. So they're trying to push that strategy down, or that direction down, so the team can develop the strategy. And so really what really was this idea of how do we communicate better as a team. How do we have that radical candor? How do we be vulnerable with one another? How do we work together and become this cohesive team? And so actually last week, which is usually if I structure it and they need it, I'll try to do some form of disc or some form of personality assessment with them. That way, and I like disc, and then there's multiple variations of it. Last week I happened to use the Maxwell disc, but really it's this idea about how to communicate with one another. And I know you're familiar with disc, and some of your listeners probably are too. But how do we, understanding who we are as a person, how we communicate, and then as leaders, how we need to flex with each other and communicate with each other. And so that's really some of the things we did. I don't know if I answered your question, but as an example, that's a lot of the things that we work with on staff. One of the big things that I've been focusing on is that there's a lot of team development, right? There's a lot of organizations that do team development and all that, but I really believe that leadership starts with the person. And so we've been focusing a lot here with some of the content, some of the things that we do, that we offer to everyone, not just people who contact us and want to work with us, but really this idea of personal growth. And because I feel like as a leader, and again, I hate to keep bringing up John Maxwell. He talks about in the 21 laws of leadership. He talks about the law of the lid, which is the first law, which your ability to manage, your ability to run your organization is only going to be as only going to be as high as your lid is. So if you have a 5, your business is going to be a 4. And so how do we grow our lid? And I think as we grow our leadership lids, through personal growth and development, then I think it carries over into the team. And I think the best leader is a self-aware leader, right? So I think as you learn about yourself and you learn to grow and you learn to be intentional about growing, I think that it really has a huge impact on the team aspect, organizational health.
Roger that. I agree 100%. The love that the analogy of the lid. If you're a 5, your organization can't be better than a 4.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one to swallow, because I think a lot of leaders think the organization supersedes them, is more important to them. Ultimately, it is, right? I mean, like at the end of the day, if the CEO gets let go or leaves, they will be replaced, right? So the organization will continue, but within my rule of thumb is within 36 months, that organization will be ultimately now a reflection of you.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah.
In your policies and your decisions. And I mean, like a president only gets 4 years to run America.
That's right.
Unless they get reelected. So, and in the current way, I'm hoping it's 4.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Yeah.
But within so you have to, that person at that level has to make a lot of policy change, a lot of, drive, pull a lot of levers, right, to try and raise the standing of the country. So you take that down to a microcosm of a company that's a few dozen or a few hundred people, right? And a few million to maybe a few $100 million. I mean, that very quickly you have a lot of influence. This is one thing that I think most leaders are missing, is just how influential they are.
Absolutely.
How important they are, how much their words carry weight. And because they're like, we sort of have this, like, you and I are similar. Like, we grew up dirt poor in rural parts of America. And we just don't think about ourselves. And I've had to do a lot of work to overcome this personally. We don't always think about ourselves as important as we can be.
That's right.
Right. But those leaders that I follow, the ones that really respect, and I read their books and I study their companies. I mean, these people step in. They may have had that story at one point too, but they've overcome. They recognize, like, hey, my leadership carries weight.
That's right.
Right. And I have to be intentional.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it goes back for me. It was this epiphany that I had I think it was last August. And, I've always struggled with imposter syndrome, and those type of things, which, based on what you just said, I'm sure you have too. But and it's like, you bring things to the table, but at the end of the day, other people have always been more important. You've always valued other people more. And, what I've really since August is I'm a person of value, right? Like, and I know that sounds so so lovey-dovey and so cliche, but really that I think the first step in anything, in any development, is understanding that, hey, I'm a person of value. In order for me to add value to anybody, I don't care what leadership role you're in, you have to value yourself first. And I think as soon as you recognize that you're a person of value and you know what your strengths are, you know what your value, then you can start building in others as a leader. And, again,
Mhm.
we're not even talking about like, you and I, we do training and development, coaching, all that stuff, but really you're talking, I mean, leaders, to your point, don't recognize, I think sometimes, that the impact that the words that they use, the body language they use, all those things that they use in a meeting have a huge impact on someone's comfort and their own self-worth. You know what I mean? And I think
Mhm.
that's a really good point that you brought up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if I can provide any encouragement to people listening, right, is to start leaning into to seeing yourself bigger,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? Because you're only here for a short amount of time. I
Yeah.
don't want anybody to end up, resentful that they missed an opportunity.
Yeah.
And reality is like every single one of us sells ourselves short of what's actually possible because we depend on ourselves. But when you bring in yourself plus God into that equation, now all of a sudden
Absolutely.
like, you're capable of far more than you ever dreamed possible, or that you would ever dare to dream possible for yourself. So good, man.
Absolutely.
Let's just do a little speed round here to finish out and talk
Okay.
a little bit more about your insights. I know it sounds like you're a Maxwell guy. What do you
Yeah.
recommend people be reading or
Oh,
listening to?
so for me, probably the best book that I've ever read. And what's funny is before I joined the John Maxwell team, I had never read a Maxwell book. Obviously, I knew who John Maxwell was. I didn't know to the extent of what he was. He's written more books on leadership and personal growth than any other author in the world. But for me, the best book that I've ever read and recommend everyone read it is The 15 Laws of Invaluable Growth. And it's really
Mm,
this idea to me, it's a good guide for, if you want to learn how to grow personally and develop personally, it's really a good guide. It's the first law, which is but oddly enough, is the law of intentionality, right? And
mhm,
it's
mhm,
this idea of being intentional with being intentional with the way you approach things, the gaps that you have to get over. I think, he talks about, as an example, some of the gaps that he talks about. And I'm drawing a blank now because I want to talk about them. But getting over those gaps, like now's not the right time. That gap of, there's no better time than now, right? The law of diminishing
right.
return, all those things. And but all the way through, and he talks about this idea of being significant, and being significant is more than, it's not this, well, I'm significant type thing. It's that I'm had a, I live with a purpose, and I serve the people that I served, and that I want to add value to people. So 15 Laws of Valuable Growth, I would recommend. And he just came out with a new book. It's going to be released in May, called High Road Leadership.
Mhm,
And I was in at his conference here a month ago or a couple weeks ago, and I actually have an advanced copy of it. It's a phenomenal book. Again, it comes out in May, but it's really about how to lead in a decisive time. When you look at the way the world's divided today, it's me versus
mm.
them, or us versus them, and it's a really good values-based book on how to lead in
That
a decisive time. But
Yeah, I think that's going to be a really interesting one. We live in such an adversarial culture these
yeah,
days, right?
yeah.
And that would be one thing, RJ, that I would challenge our generation to eradicating.
Absolutely.
Like, can we lead can our generation lead people back to the time when we can have open dialogue and debate and completely disagree on a topic, but still love each other at the end of the day?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
I don't know when we started hating the person, right? We can hate how they think. We can dislike their ideology. We can dislike it, but I don't want them judging me, so why do I judge them? And again, not to get, biblical or whatever, but again, I just think that I don't know when it became wrong for us to have disagreements about
Mhm.
how we think or what we believe. And I think there are still a lot of people out there that that are okay and are willing to have disagreements. The problem is we don't hear from those people. What do they say?
Mhm.
The left is a 10, the right's the 10, then you've got the 80% in the middle, and we never hear from the 80. All you hear is from the 10% on both
Yeah.
sides. It's politics specifically, but I also think it's this issue as well, right? I think we never hear from the people that have common sense, but I have a guy that tells me common sense isn't so common anymore. So
Yeah, yeah, that's for
yeah.
sure, man. That's
Yeah.
for sure. Cool. All right. Well, check out High Road Leadership coming out in May, John Maxwell, and then 15 Laws of Invaluable
Valuable
Growth.
growth. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Couple of good ones. Awesome. What do you do? I mean, I know you travel a lot, you're going a lot, you got kids. What is the mode of action for you to stay healthy, productive, and keep your energy up?
So, that's also something that's a great point. So, that's also something that I've struggled with, is being healthy. And I think my wife tells me, she goes, "Sweetheart, you're not fat. You're just not healthy," which is her way of saying you need to lose some weight. You need to. So for me, I think I think in the last couple of years, I've really recognized like, hey, you've got to be cognitive of what you're putting in your body. Just drink more water.
Mhm.
I find it hard to exercise time wise just because of just we're going, and honestly that's an excuse. If I tell people that tell me I don't have time for something is that, hey, you just haven't made it a priority, right? And so for me, but what I have made a priority is trying to actually eat healthier, right? And so instead of going to eat the Mexican food with all the chips and dip, you can stay in. Maybe you eat to go somewhere and grab a salad, or so I try to be cognitive of what I put in my body, but then also too cognitive of sleep. We
Mhm.
get caught up in, I know I can getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep at night. And that's not good. They say, and again, I'm not a doctor, and I'm probably quoting something I read that was wrong, but because it was on the internet, it's true, right? But if you have 4 hours of sleep, if you average 4 hours of sleep a night, basically you're operating like you're drunk all the time because your body doesn't have time to reset. So I think for me, the biggest thing here lately has just been getting enough sleep, you having a routine at night, getting up in the morning, that kind of thing. So
Yep. It really boils down to standards for how we want to experience life.
that's right. That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
That's it. And all of my results are a reflection of my current standards.
that's right. That's absolutely right.
And sometimes I have to sit back and say, I don't like my results right now.
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah,
You know? And I went through like a little bit of a health challenge last year, and so it wasn't as intense with my exercise. I haven't stopped exercising, but have not been as intense. I always make it a priority. At least 5 out of 7 days a week, I make it a priority. And I got to a point where like I wasn't running, I wasn't operating with the level of intensity. I stepped on the scale the other day, I was at 225. And that was the most that I have ever weighed in my entire life. Again, not fat, not really out of shape, but just not to the standard that I have for myself. So my
yeah,
wife and I are on a mission. She's got some stuff she's working on. I got some stuff I'm working on, trying to make it happen, right?
yeah.
Bringing that back down. So it was 10 this month, the month of April was 10 pounds or 2% body fat, whichever comes first. That's the goal.
That's the goal. That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's
Right.
great. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love to hear that you exercise. I actually wish that was a regiment that I actually do. I just don't. It's time to start, I guess. You're
It's
challenging
time to
me,
start,
Mark.
man. I tell you,
Yeah.
sweaty selfie or it didn't happen. You can text it to me tomorrow morning after you get back from the gym.
Say that again now.
It says sweaty selfie or it didn't happen. You can
That's
text it to me
exactly,
tomorrow when you get done.
that's exactly right. That's funny.
Good. That's we actually do that with a lot of our clients. So it's really cool. So when you come to our Thriving Leader program, you get to see this. We'll do a workout at the onset of the program, and does a lot in terms of adding to the actual program itself. But one of the things that's cool, a lot of times that teams that come, they start working out together, or it becomes part of the culture within their company. So we have ag retail guys take this. Ag retail guys that are sending sweaty selfies in with their CEO coming from the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I
That's
love
awesome.
it. I love it because it means we're actually affecting real change, but they're actually embedding healthy lifestyles into their culture, which is really, really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I think I've seen some social media posts about that of yours. So
Yeah, I also think it's probably the reason some people won't come to the event because they're afraid of what we're going to make them do.
yeah, that's right. I don't know. I might not lie. That may not be the reason. That may be the reason why. Maybe no. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Good
Yeah.
stuff, man. Well, I wish we could talk for hours. I'm sure we could make a really long form podcast. Unfortunately, it's a short show. But what any last thoughts that you'd share on leadership, intentional leadership with the listeners?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show with you, Mark. I would tell you that intentionality is really about action, right? So it's just pausing, reflecting, and then acting on what we said we were going to act on. So I would encourage everyone just to take on Sunday night, take Friday night, whatever. I wouldn't do it Monday morning because it's hard to be intentional Monday morning, right? You guys all know what comes at you Monday morning, but really take time, be intentional about your week, be intentional about your day, reflect every day, and really think about what's coming up and try to focus on the big things, whether it be family, whether it be big projects you've got at work. The important things we don't spend enough time on because we get caught up in the day to day. So I'd encourage everyone from intentionality perspective to pause, reflect, and then carry out the action and be disciplined with your schedule. So
Love it, man. I appreciate you being on. How do we find out more about Oklahoma Co-op Council?
yeah, you go to our website, okagcoop.org, and check us out there. We're also on, I think we're on Facebook, Twitter, and I think Instagram now.
Mhm.
Some push to do some TikTok stuff if that still exists here, or Munchin or Mooch, whatever buys it. So we'll see what happens there. But anyway,
We'll see. All
yeah.
right. Good stuff, man. All right. Thanks for being on.